member is on his way, but we'll start with introductions, so hopefully he won't miss anything. Like to tell you all, we're really happy to be here to help you all with this endeavor. It's commendable that the city of Simonton is thinking of preparing this comprehensive plan. And we are really looking forward to working with you through the process. We'll share our contact. Feel free to call any of us at any time. So we have the agenda for today is just kind of to run you through what we were thinking is so we have the first part of the meeting. It's supposed to be like a 2-hour meeting. I know we started a little late, but we'll try to catch up and make sure you leave on time. So the first part is just a work session, start with introduction, talk a little bit about what is a comprehensive plan, what is the process, what kind of work schedule will work for the city of Simonton, talk about public engagement, public participation, which is a big component of the comprehensive plan, and that's why you are all here, to make sure that that happens. And also get some input from CPAC and city council members that might be here, to just kind of set a stage for the next few months. And then the second part is a city tour. Normally we would get on a bus and drive through, but we're just trying to be as smart as the generations that are after us. So we thought we'll just do a city tour. So we'll use Google Maps. We have maps for you all to follow as we go along, and just talk about areas and issues in the city, just sitting right here. We'll take a break between for 2 sessions, just to give you some time to, grab some food, or feel free at any time. It's a very informal session. Like I said, the goal is to work with the community, so you can relax, and if you want to put your feet up, that's fine too. Just so we'll start off with the introduction. Wanted to just see if any city council members are here. You want to introduce yourself?
I'm Burns.
You're supposed to stand up.
Okay, Burns.
Council member.
Courtney Cox.
Justin Goodrow.
Okay, great. Thank you all again so much for your time. Your participation is going to be really invaluable to come up with a plan that is Simonton, that belongs to the people of Simonton. So we will be looking to you for guidance all throughout the process. CPAC members, do you want to go to the room and just introduce yourself?
Stacy Goatee. Susan Ledart.
Angela King.
Jeff Gannon.
Andy Perry.
Glenn Plowman. David Lowe. Burns Turner.
CJ Abram.
Oh my God.
Oscar Opus.
Barbara Minton.
Cinda Frost.
Wonderful, thank you.
Perfect time.
The perfect time, because we just went through and everybody said their name.
So if you want to introduce yourself.
Brian Jordan.
Okay, great. And then we have staff here. I guess everybody knows.
We don't know everybody.
Craig Calcamy, engineer and city flood plan manager.
Jennifer Moore, sitting over here.
Laurie Goodrow. Next, just our team introductions. You can look at the next one. Yeah. So, and most of us are here, but we also have Mindy Snyder on our team. Some of you met Mindy when we first came to make our presentation. She's our client services manager. Mindy has been a city manager most of her life, 4 cities in this area. She's worked, the last job she had was as a city manager for El Campo. And this year, Mindy had a busy year because she's a Rotarian and she was a district governor, so she's been traveling a lot, but she's finally back and ready to focus on Simonton now. My name is Lata Krishnaram. I'll be the project manager. I've had over 30 years of work experience working for small cities in Connecticut and then in Texas for the last almost 20 years. I was the Community Development Director for the City of Pearland, where I worked for 14 years and saw the city grow from like 35,000 to 125,000, and it was a great experience for me. Very fortunate to have that experience. And then I'm going to have Diana introduce herself.
Yeah, I'm Diana Ducro, and I have been a planner for about 20 years. I grew up in Houston, but my family's from Brazoria County, and I've worked for a lot of different small cities around the whole Southeast Texas area. I work a lot in Brookshire right now, and we worked in Meadville recently, and so yeah, it's I'm not as familiar with this part of Fort Bend County yet, but I'm just was amazed at how beautiful it is when I first came out here. And I'm excited to be able to work with you.
And then Joe.
I'm Joe Ash, and I've been in economic development for a little bit over 30 years. Actually, I started working the work world with Boeing. I did avionics weapon systems on B-52s and a few things on Air Force One, and then after finishing my grad work, started in economic development in North Dakota, which at a time in '92, people didn't think the state existed. If it did exist, they didn't want to move a company there. From there, I came down here in 1999 and started Sugar Land's Economic Development Department and was there for over a decade. Always had responsibility for economic development, but I had the airport, Parks and Rec, started transportation planning, legislative affairs. So I was there, left in 2010 and worked with a private development firm for about 3 years, but I was traveling all the time. My kids called me their second favorite father, and I wanted to find out who the first one was. So I started working for Missouri City and ran their economic development department until I retired from TMRS, and about 2.5 years ago was doing commercial real estate. It had a number of communities and companies that asked for assistance, and so started a company, and now primarily I work with communities on economic development and administration and other things like that from the years of experience. So I'm here to help out, work with this team on the economic development aspects of the project.
Thank you, Joe. And who you see here on the screen is Krishna. She's our planner, GIS, our technical person, great resource. She is very resourceful in finding information, so she'll be also working on the project. And then Ardura, we have an entire technical support team that's engineering folks that will be helping with the transportation, the storm drainage, utility part of it, especially sustainability and resiliency, and talking about floodplain and flooding issues. So they will be our support team. And so our planning team in Ardura, we're fairly new, but we've been a part of this group for about 4 years now. And before that, all of us were working for different cities, a lot of municipal experience. Lately, we completed the Needville Comprehensive Plan with Joe, and then we also completed a project in Rockdale. If you know, it was the corridor project there. We're helping cities like Brookshire, Angleton, Lamarck. I was just all over the place. Bel Air, Tomball. So all the way to Fair Oaks Ranch in San Antonio, if you know where that is, Hill Country. So we really have had, this great opportunity to work small cities in Texas. And I think what we love is just working with people and just trying to, make sure that your aspirations, we're able to articulate that and put it in a document that helps you grow like you want to grow. Let me go next. I'm going to start off with a few basic slides on comprehensive plan. And we thought it would be important because you all don't have a comprehensive plan. This is your first comprehensive plan. So first of all, congratulations on taking this step. I think this is a great step. And timely too, as you will see, as Joe presents his compelling reasons and we talk about why it's important. I think this is a great time to have a comprehensive plan. A lot of cities wait till they grow or start feeling the pressure, but the best time to do it is before that happens so that you're ready. So again, why do cities plan? It is a legal requirement. The Texas state requires cities to have a comp plan if they want to adopt certain ordinances, or now what we are finding is for funding, it's really, really important to have a comp plan. The GLO funding is based on the comp plan. Any flood mitigation grants, HUD grants, federal grants, they all are requiring cities to have a comprehensive plan. So it's a great tool that helps you to get money to do good stuff.
Can you just say that one more time? It's not my first time to hear it, but let's talk, just maybe expand a tiny bit more about that.
Okay.
If you would, because I think there's been a requirement change, right? So we haven't had to have a comprehensive plan to be able to qualify before.
Correct. So it depends on the grants, and Joe is going to talk a little bit more
Okay.
in detail in this presentation. But like, for example, the GLO came up with Resilient Communities Grant, right? So we are helping cities apply for the grant. The first thing they ask for is, do you have a comprehensive plan? And if you don't, then the first thing to do is to have a comprehensive plan in place. A lot of grants that came because of Harvey flooding, cities had to have a grant comprehensive plan. I think that's how Brookshire ended up adopting a comprehensive plan, because they were applying for those grants. So yeah, there are some grants that definitely, the agencies want to make sure that the grant is being used in a holistic manner and not just Band-Aid solutions.
Thank you.
That makes sense.
And Joe, please feel free to pitch in.
And also, ultimately, if you're planning and it anticipates things for your thoroughfare master plan, for a Parks and Rec plan, if you're going to do that at some point. Communities use it for a number of things. From an economic development plan, it's a founding document. And as it goes to land use regulation, if you're going to adopt zoning, all those things, it's kind of an umbrella document. And so it helps inform and used as the basis that you build. It's forward-looking. It looks out decades, and so it's one of the big visioning documents that then you fill in as you add the other components to that.
So, but it's also, it sounds to me like you're saying for any zoning or ordinances and all that stuff, it's required.
It depends on some of the ordinances, but zoning, if you're going to adopt zoning, you have to have it. And then your zoning has to be in conformance with it, because there needs to be consistency.
Right. So the comprehensive plan itself is a guiding document. It really does not have teeth. Like it just sets the vision, right? The cities then, once the plan is in place, they have to adopt other actual ordinances to make this happen. And that's where, if land use is a big issue for the city, you can use comp plan to actually regulate land uses, but then you would have to adopt zoning. Same thing, if the thoroughfare part of the comprehensive plan may have recommendations, but till you adopt those standards, the engineering standards, subdivision standards, it's not going to happen. But it's just a guiding document. So even if the comp plan is adopted, nothing is going to change overnight. It's a process. It just sets the stage for the city to move forward. So that's why it's important to have this comprehensive plan, because it brings all the common values that the city shares together, quality of life, or be it crime prevention. It also helps to protect and sustain investment, looks at environmental compliance. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, but it also, cities plan so that they can direct not just the physical growth, but social, economic, environmental development, because all these are interrelated. And it helps the decision-making bodies to make policy decisions. If a city council is faced with a certain situation where they need to make a decision, they go back on the comprehensive plan, because one, they know this is what the community collectively thinks, and then the comprehensive plan in their implementation strategy might have a roadmap on how to solve that issue or resolve that issue, at least a guide. And it's really important for, capital improvement programming, asset management. How do you plan to provide for the growth that's going to come in the future, be firemen, fire trucks, how do you even plan not knowing which way the city's heading? Next, please.
I think there's another element that this is a public process. And so you're also collectively, you're looking for robust discussion, not just people who agree, but people who don't agree. Because out of that conversation, you get a chance to explore the things where people have different points of view, so that you're getting a collective vision of where as a community that you want to go. And that's a strong element to bring people of different views together, because we're not all supposed to agree. Unfortunately today, a lot of people think that being disagreeable and disagreeing are the same thing. But we can disagree and move this process forward, and that's one of the strengths of this approach.
So just, when we talk about planning, what is it? The city is made up of a lot of components. You have residential, you have commercial, you have cultural, educational, institutional, and all these have competing interests sometimes. So how do you bring all of them together? So it's almost like a jigsaw puzzle with all these parts that have to fit perfectly for the big picture to emerge. So, so the comprehensive plan discusses some of these issues, and then so what are we trying to create? We are trying to create a place where people can live, work, study, recreate, shop, socialize, right? So bringing all those aspects is really the goal of the comprehensive of city planning, which is to provide a place for people that promotes all their aspirations in a safe, healthy, and public welfare manner. So that's how the whole the city planning comes into place. And then the next step would be then, what are some of the other things that you consider while planning for the city? Circulation. How do you get from place A to B, or is there congestion? And circulation is not just for cars. You have 2 truck routes through the city. What does it mean for safety of your residents? I think there is a picture here. We saw a gentleman riding his bike on the street. So they're bikers, they're walkers, there are people with disabilities who are not able to drive. So at the end of the day, how do you cater? Well, first of all, is it important to cater to their needs? And if it is, how and where do you incorporate that in your circulation plan? So we don't really call it a transportation plan, it's more of a mobility plan and a circulation plan. So this comprehensive plan will have a big component of your thoroughfare mobility, especially because the way Simonton is situated is surrounded by all these growth, and you have a highway on one side, you have all these county roads that people used to just pass through your city. So how do you capitalize on that and make sure that as more traffic comes to your town, you still are able to maintain your character and a quality of life that you want for your residents? I mean, so you've seen certain cities where what it ends up is one big strip center from one end of the other with tires and auto shops, and so that may be okay for some cities if that's their aspiration, but if it's not, then the comprehensive plan helps to at least have that discussion and dialogue as it just what do we want to for Simonton. It also talks about utilities, aesthetics. As you grow, provision of water, sewer is important. So what comes first? Is it the chicken or the egg kind of a situation? And hazard mitigation is a big deal. Of course, you all know that flooding is a big issue. So how do we start addressing that in the future in a manner that is safe for residents? So how do cities plan? Typically, the process starts with the vision. So it's called the visioning process, which is where all your participation is really important, because this sets the foundation for the entire document. So this is, what does the community want? What do you not want? What do you see yourself 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road? Once the vision is in place, we start looking at developing a plan. So how do you get there? You want to get from place A to place B, but what is the roadmap that you have to take? So that's what the plan is typically called: a comprehensive plan, a master plan, land use plan. There are a number of terms for it. And then once you have a plan, that's not enough, right? We all know that it has to be implementable. So there is a section in the comp plan that talks about how do you implement it. And it could be just breaking down into different smaller sections. It could be thoroughfare improvements, infrastructure improvements, building design guidelines, landscaping. It could be a lot of things, but that has to be in place. And then once all that is done, there needs to be a tool to measure success. So typically the comp plan will have some guidance on how do you measure if you're moving in the right direction. And so those are some of the ways that you would get to a comprehensive plan. And then we talked about what it does. It's a vision that's set for the city. Where do you want to be in the next 10, 20 years? What is important to think about in this whole process is, what will the city look like if nothing is done, right? And so you have examples around of things that you like, that you don't like, and it's important to have that discussion. If you like something, how does that happen? If you don't like something, what are ways to make sure that that doesn't happen in your city? And then making sure that whatever growth comes in is in line with the vision that you all will spend 10, 12 months to get that vision in place. So with community buy-in, so that everybody is, as close to the same baseline
Okay,
as
Lana,
possible.
on the vision, I just want to bring up so everybody historically knows, we didn't just decide 2 months ago to do a comp plan. We've actually been working on this for about 3 years now. We went with an independent contractor who they all are very familiar with, Mr. Ron Cox, and we did a strategic plan. A strategic plan is a short-term plan with short-term goals that lead to long-term comprehensive plan. So typically you do a strategic plan prior to doing a comprehensive plan. And basically what it does is you'll see down here at council always we have our vision elements, and these are basically the guiding benchmarks for everything that we do in the city. So in that strategic plan we were able to identify what those vision elements were. So everything that we do with budget is tied to a strategic vision element. And so we exercise that every time we discuss budget. We have some sort of capital improvement project, a capital outlay project, anything that we do that has a term limit on it or a fiscal number, we tie it to a vision element. That strategic plan will build into the comprehensive, what you said, like the overall vision element of the city. So I just wanted everybody to understand that there has been some confusion out there with people thinking we just decided to do this a month or 2 months ago. That is not the case. This has been 3 years in the building. It is a building block process because it is so comprehensive and because it does entail such a long-term aspect of 10, 15, 20 years.
So this just So this just shows some of the elements. Once the plan is done, what are you going to see? Typically it has some text. It will be broken down into chapters. We'll share like a outline that we have, but through the process we'll also hear from you that we need a chapter on this or we need a chapter on that. And then there will be maps that kind of show, on a map what areas we're talking about, land use map, thoroughfare plan, utilities map. Graphs and tables to support some of the recommendations and findings, and also a lot of illustrations to, again, like I said, this is a guiding document. But when the city is ready or a developer comes to the table, you will have something to start the discussion with to make sure that the developer also understands the city's vision. Excellent. So I'm going to hand it over to Joe here, and he's going to talk a little bit about, a lot about economic development and fiscal aspects of it.
So when you think about communities, change is inevitable. They don't stay the same. They either grow or they decline. The problems associated with growth are a heck of a lot better to deal with than the problems associated with decline. And so what we're trying to do is put the community in a position where we can leverage opportunities to grow in a direction that is the best interest. It also, the benefit of the plan is it put things in place, because sometimes when things go right, it's great and it's going your way, but when they go wrong, how do you react to it? What are your goals? How do you deal with it? What are the challenges? Embrace the difficulties that part of it is. The best way to predict the future is to create. That comes from Herb Apple, who used to run the Greater Fort Bend EDC, and that was something he always talked about at Fort Bend. And when I got to Fort Bend, it was about 400-some-thousand people, and now we're over 800,000 people. And so the whole growth across the county, we've tried to make sure we can direct that in a way that we'd like. Now, you're never going to make it 100%, but you're trying to impact its direction in the proper way. Because change is coming. Think of places like Detroit. The problems associated with the decline are horrible. And we have a lot of growth. I actually am one of your neighbors, and then I live over here in Weston Lakes. And so the growth is coming this direction. Because I come up and down 1093 as I see that things are getting built. Change is coming, so how are we going to impact that change? Economic development is a component of this. It comes out of this goal. It's how we utilize tools, both the carrot and the stick being the regulation and the carrot being how we utilize incentives like the development corporations that we have here. Because what's happened is that there's been a change in what communities look at. They look at saying, how are we involved in this process? We're no longer just a regulator. We're in the process of working with developers, the public and the private sector, to make sure that we're accomplishing some objectives. It's not just about police and fire and sewer and water. Think about in some places where there's redevelopment going on because they weren't proactive. And if you work ahead of time, maybe you can stave off some of that, not all of it, but maybe you can make sure that the pitfalls aren't as low, and yet you can still maintain the highs. So we're looking to partner as we go forward. Next slide, please. So we're in one of the fastest growing counties in the nation. And when you look at that in this county, the neighbor down the way of Fulshire is the fastest growing city in this area. The tremendous amount of growth. It's going to impact us. Growth is just a wave. As you look at that effort, you can see by 2035, we're going to grow another 25%. We're going to be over 1 million people in this county. Things are growing along the way. We need to participate in that process to help shape it to the extent, because you're all residents, you'll have different views. You moved here for a reason. And some things are going to be able to be maintained and some things are going to change. I grew up in Wichita, Kansas, and when I was there were about 250,000 people when I was a kid. And there was a field down at the end of the street that we would go play in as kids, and we had a great time. And later on, as I was doing economic development, I went back and they were building houses, and I got angry. Like, what did they do out of my field? They changed my reality. They changed what I grew up in. And I realized then that the processes that changes, that's why people say, I want it to stay the same. It's not going to stay the same. So as you look at the growth, this area is just going to be, look at Twinwood and all the opportunities. That's a great opportunity. It's going to bring a lot of development here. How do we partner with the development community? How do we recognize they have certain needs, their development timelines, their returns are different than what a community is. So partnering and seeing how we can work together is important. Next slide. I'm not going to read all the slides. Y'all can read it. I just kind of hit the high points. So for me, as I look at it, here are some of the keys to success in any plan or any economic development effort. You have to have a clear vision. What are you trying to do? What do you want to be when you grow up? If you don't know where you're going, how do you know when you've arrived? When you look at that, you try to create some specific goals. Those goals still need to have flexibility. One of the first projects I worked on when I got to this area was Sugarland Town Square. So Sugarland had some specific goals, but it also had flexibility. That flexibility, for example, in 32 acres, they could have up to 288 residential units. There's 167. You could have up to 244,000 square feet of retail. There's about that. It could have office space between 600,000 and 1 million square feet. So it developed, and what we did as a community in working with that, and here's how that brings that together, is that we recognized as we provided as a community incentives to make that project happen, that there was a return that we need to have. We're not just going to go throw money and hope it happens. If it was not successful to this minimum amount, would it still pay for itself in what we were providing? We made sure that we had measures to determine how that was going. Because economic development doesn't make a bad project a good project. It makes a good project possible. Here versus there, today versus tomorrow, to a different quality standard because you're partnering in that development. It may stave off. It may actually make something not as bad if you have a layoff. Well, how do you work with the things in other communities where you have a huge employment base? You deal with a lot of different factors. So it has to also have a sound business premise. If we want to have NASA move here, it's not going to happen. So make sure that you have a sound business premise for your economic development goals. Strong public input, or you'll have a revolt on your hands. As you try to change things, you want to make sure that you've engaged the citizens, engaged their views. Listen, it doesn't mean that you can't make everybody happy. You're never going to make everybody happy. But at least you've gone through a participative process to deliberate and make good, sound decisions. Now, some places where projects go forward, this last one's included, because if you do a project where, whether it's a Twinwood or a town square or a Brazos Town Center in Rosenberg or any type of large project, you need to have a private partner in that process who's capable. And when you're working on projects, someone brings that to you, you're also evaluating the capacity of the people that you're working for before you invest in them to ensure, at least minimize the opportunity for downsides. Next slide, please. So I took this from the International Economic Development Council, IEDC. It's from their reference guide. Because how you define economic development, there's a lot of ways, and this is how they define it. This is one of the ones I'll kind of read. The main goal of economic development is to improve the economic well-being of the community through efforts that entail job creation, job retention, tax-based enhancements, and quality of life. There's no single definition of economic development. There's no single strategy, policy, or program to achieve successful economic development. Communities differ in their geographic and political strengths and weaknesses. Each community, therefore, will have a unique set of challenges in economic development. Things change. In some places, like when I started in rural North Dakota, it might be a grocery store. In other places, it can be the Smart Financial Center. It's going to change, and it's going to be unique to your community, most likely. So what is economic development? It varies. That definition is what within the parameters that we're going to deal with. Why should the community get involved? Because you're looking to challenge, to change the direction of a community and help it grow that fits a vision of the community. Sometimes it's important in this process, like I said, to have specific goals, to know what you want, because then you know what you don't want. Somebody shows up and says, I got the greatest thing for you. Here's what I'm going to bring. And you can say, wait a second, does that fit what we see as our vision for our community and where we should invest our time? You look at it and say, what is success? Success is depending on how the community determines it. There may be a variety of things, and we'll talk about benefits, but hopefully what you're trying to do with that success is you're trying to receive some benefit to the community for your participation in that process. From that, who defines success? That's through a process. Ultimately, the city council makes a determination. We have a representative form of government. They're not going to check every decision with the citizens, but they're going to check for input to see how they can make sure that they're representing the interest of the community. From that process, what do you want to do? My daddy used to say, what do you want to do and what do you want to do to get there? So when you choose to do your success, there's things that you want to do and things you don't want to do. Typically, government entities are risk-averse investors. They don't want to put their goals out there. They want to put their investments out there that are risky, because in today's society, you would go invest in a restaurant, let's say, as a community, hey, we're going to go put this here. Yelp can change that real quick, and then your funds are gone. So you try to make sure that you're careful and judicious in the use of your economic development tools. The city's role will change. It'll change depending on what the outcomes you're seeking, depending on the preferences of the community. Changes for a number of reasons. And why are incentives? Incentives are never the first place you start in economic development. In fact, I'm going to argue one of the best places to start for economic development is having clear, defined development processes and guidelines. If developers are coming in and they understand how to work with your community, that's great. If they don't, then they're chasing their tails, and that's money to them, and time is money. And so a clear process is one of the best places to start. And then incentives are the last thing, because, like I said, a sound business premise, you can't make a bad project out of or can't make a good project out of a bad one. And so therefore, incentives are the differentiating factor typically between one community and another, one type of project, or sometimes it's where you don't have the ability to regulate. So for example, in 2019, in September, the state of Texas took away the ability for communities to control building materials, with certain exceptions for communities where there's life safety issues, coastal. And so the ability for a city to say, hey, we want this type of facade in a project, or we want X, Y, what have you, where you can't regulate that. Sometimes you can use economic development to move that in a direction to achieve an outcome that you otherwise could not achieve through regulation. Next slide, please. So benefits. There's a lot of benefits, and when you look at why you might invest, there's both direct and indirect, both tangible and intangible types of benefits is why you might value a project. I'll go back to Sugar Land Town Square for a second. Think about that for a second. We measured the economic interest that would bring to the community. What we didn't measure at the time, and what has since become, is an icon to the community. When I got to Sugar Land in '99, what was it known for? Imperial Sugar and the Pink Lady, the chart house. Everybody thought of that. Around Christmas, you'd see it light up. That was the vision of Sugar Land. Now what is it? It's Stephen F. Austin on a horse is what people think of. That economic development project is what most people think about when, from an image standpoint, now it's not everybody, I don't want to say that there's nothing everybody thinks about, but it's become the common thing that when people think of the community, what comes up. So an icon can be a benefit if it creates an identity for a community. Things that you look at what you might see inducement to surrounding development. Another thing that happened, the first Colony Mall, when the city of Sugar Land did that in 1996, that was privately driven. The city got involved with the 4A and 4B Corporation to help make that project happen more quickly. That spurred the retail development in and around the area. You started seeing development on the other side where Lowe's is at, in and around the area that became the engine that drove a lot of growth. So there's a number of benefits, both things that you see directly and things that you don't see directly, things that you can touch and feel and things that aren't as easy to understand. Next one, please. So here's some examples of communities that have comprehensive plans around the area that you'd be familiar with. They all use them. No community that I'm aware of that's really successful, that you'd like to live in, succeeds without doing some sort of good planning. And the comprehensive plan is a way to take care of starting that process. These are just some examples of those communities. And economic development, as I said, means different things to different communities in different areas. Here's some examples of just some of the projects in and around the area that you might see. In Missouri City, from the residential side, Sienna has become an economic development project. It is an economic development project. You look at Fort Bend Town Center 2, which is located at Fort Bend Parkway and Highway 6. Amazon. And here's something, just because you say economic development, sometimes the answer is no. Amazon came to the city of Missouri City while I was there, and they said, we want to put this in there, and my gosh, you need to, we're going to do you a favor. We normally do 100% on tours, but we're going to cut you some slack. We're going to do 90%. We said, let's reset this negotiation. How about zero? You're coming anyway. So you're assessing what's going on. That project came without any incentive. We understood their timeline, understood where they were going. And now it generates about $600,000 a year in tax revenue to the city alone. So understanding your economic development program and your goals, and understanding how to approach this, sometimes what you did, now, it's not the city said go away. We said, okay, what's important to you is you've got a rapid development timeline. So how can we in economic development work with you to get you permitted faster? Maybe we can split the permits. We're doing the horizontal permits first, and we're doing things over time to meet your development time frame. So we changed the approach from incentives to how do we help you get up and under construction and develop. Other projects, HCC's campus, when I got there, they wanted to do the development on Texas Parkway. The land next to City Hall had been vacant for decades. Nothing had happened. HCC, on the other hand, was in Sienna and was closing sometimes during the summer because they didn't have a base. The kids in Sienna weren't going there. So we worked with them, brought Johnson Development and the county together. They bought HCC's campus. HCC bought the land next to City Hall and has built a brand new campus. They revised the library. It was the largest single investment on Texas Parkway in about 40 years. Rosenberg, Fort Bend Town Center, Builder's Supply, which is a construction company that has supplies that run through it. All the Dollar Tree, Occusoft, Wet Sounds, those are examples. The Epicenter, which is a county project, it's an economic infusion into Rosenberg. In Stafford, the Grid, that used to be the Texas Instruments location, Stafford Center, US 98 revitalization. In Sugar Land, Town Square, the First Colony Mall, U of H campus, that was a project where the city helped invest in the first two buildings. And in consideration, we leased land from, when I was there, we leased land from them. Smart Financial Center, Constellation Field, Imperial Sugar, those are all examples. And there are many more. But I want to give you a sense for some of the projects that have been undertaken in this area, and how you can see there's a wide variety. It depends on what the community and the location. And I'm not telling you any of these are coming here. It's just here's some of the ways they happen elsewhere. That's into my thought.
So thanks, Joe. So, and like Joe said, you've seen a lot of examples. We're not saying that these will come to Simonton, but when we look at other cities that we have worked in, your location is so attractive. And you saw how Fulshire grew, and you see how Brookshire is going. We've been working in Brookshire for 3 years now, taking care of their permitting because it's just booming. And so the economic development strategy for one town may be different from another, but it's good to have a strategy so that you can plan accordingly. So there's so many different examples around you all. So just the methodology quickly, we look at it as a 3-step process. The first would be just assessing the city, looking at the existing contacts, getting input from you all to understand the city, to understand where the history of the city, what's happening now. The second step would be then we'll have some visioning exercises, which would be our next meeting, where we start talking about we'll come up with a vision, or we'll help you articulate a vision. I should be careful, yeah. We are not going to come up with it, but we'll help you through the process, come up with a vision, come up with some guiding principles, and then start looking at recommendations. So typically the report has these different sections looking at future land uses is an important one, infrastructure and utility, they all kind of go hand in hand, community image and character, like Joe said, because of the legislative changes, cities' hands are getting, it's more and more difficult, but there are ways to address it. It might not be through conventional ways, but at least if you have a vision, it's easier because you have something to fall back on. And parks, trails, community facilities would be another area. Then housing and neighborhood character. What is happening to your housing? Do you like what's happening in your cities? Do you like big lots, small lots, rural, urban, mix of homes? That's something we will all discuss with you and get a feel for what you would like to see. Transportation, I talked a little bit about that. And then economic development, marketing, just kind of probably go over some of the things Joe said and come up with some vision and principles that from you all to guide us write the comp plan. And then the last step would be, once we have all these things in place, we have the recommendations, how do we make it happen? So an implementation strategy that typically will do prioritize. What are things that can happen in the first year? What can happen in the first 2 years? What can happen in the 5 years, 10 years? 20 years now. It's important, like you saw with the examples that Joe gave, that these things did not happen overnight. You all lived in the area, so sometimes it's important to understand that there's definitely low-hanging fruit that can happen within the first year, like regulations is the first thing, right? And then there are other things that will take some more time, because some of these might also depend on what other agencies do, which we will work with, like what are text dot plans for your area. That's going to be very important. And then just looking at resources, what type of funding is available, what grants are you eligible for, what strategies do you need to utilize. The next is just a quick work schedule. We're looking at it as, being a 10, 11, 12-month process. So we are at the first 2 months now. Mobilization, this is a work session. We have a couple of dates in mind that we wanted to check with you all and get ready. So the next, what we are thinking is, so there'll be 4 CPAC meetings along the process, and if there's more needed, we'll definitely accommodate that, and then try to see if we can have 2 town hall meetings. Once we get your input as a group, we have a town hall meeting to discuss findings and visioning, and then go back and say these were the recommendations. We'll look at, the city council will be informed, getting monthly reports, and then finally have a work session with them before public hearing and adoption. So that's generally the process. One thing that definitely we'll work on is making sure public engagement is a big factor in all this. So we'll activate a website just for comp plan where you can go, and hopefully you'll be able to publish all these presentations, agendas, meeting minutes, just very brief meeting minutes, because you don't want to hear the whole thing again. And just any other, try to see, have some online forums where, people want to participate, but they're busy. But what the online forum does is maybe create a phone-based app, so you're watching with your kids in a baseball game, but you can take a quick survey. So, on demand where you are. So we'll look at a couple of those options too. And then, of course, we do believe in traditional one-on-one meetings, town hall meetings. I mean, that is also really important. Next slide. So just a little bit more on the engagement process. Our philosophy, we call it the 3 E's. The first part is to make sure that we engage the public, the residents, the stakeholders, and really those would be the advocates for the comprehensive plan. And like Joe said, it's also important to listen to the skeptics, because it's important to know where they're coming from. There might be some real concerns. So how do we make sure that those are addressed? The second part of our strategy is to educate. So like you said, there were some slides here to just kind of educate you and the public on what is a comp plan, make sure it's a transparent process, there is information given out in a timely manner, keep everybody updated as to where the project stands. And then last one is to empower, and that is where, like I said, we use a number of means to do that, face-to-face meetings, group chats, charrettes, we can look at what works. CPAC, this is a big deal. I mean, you all represent the community, so just having you here in this setting is going to be really helpful. And town hall meetings I talked about. We also work with local organization. If you have a Lions Club, a Rotary Club, a Kiwanis Club, talk to them about what their goals are, aspirations are, and look at some flyers, try to see if we can send some messages through utility bills, school notices, and if HOAs are strong. So these are some of the things. I know social media is big, Facebook is big in the city, so we'll definitely use that, and then use some other platforms like Zoom and Teams. SurveyMonkey is another tool that we use to put online surveys, and just newsletters. But this is a list that, it's like a list of things that are possible measures. What we would like to do is hear from you and say, hey, this is what the community, this is what works most for the community. So we'll talk a little bit about that as we go along. And then,
Can I ask a question really quick?
Yes.
I am not on the committees and I'm not on city council, I'm just a resident. Are you hired right now? Are y'all hired?
Yes.
But at the last city council meeting, we were discussing if this was gonna be something we're moving forward with.
It had already been approved.
So what happened?
So maybe
Were you
we'll.
here? The attorney clearly stated that the work had already been done to sign the contract.
Okay. I'm just.
We can talk more about that.
Thank you.
If you have more questions, yeah.
So, we'll have what we would like to do, if you're okay, is before we break off for our virtual bus tour, is to hear from you all now, just, random thoughts, feel free to shout it out, and I'll just write some things on the flip chart, and just listening to all this, what do you think are some of the strengths? What are your concerns? What is it that keeps you up at night? It's really the most important thing when you think about Brookshire. And then, Thank you, Brookshire.
That's okay, I'll say sure.
Sorry about that, yeah. So, and then, if you had, normally we do an exercise, if you have only $100 to spend, where would you spend it on? So how do you start prioritizing? And really the key is, if you look down 10 years, 20 years, what do you see, what would you like to see? So what do you see that you don't like, which would be your threats, and what do you want to see would be the vision that you have? So the comp plan hopefully will help you get to the vision. And so I'm going to just, open it out. Like I said, just feel free, we'll just take notes, and I'm just going to go there and write the points that I hear. So.
I'll go first. One of my biggest concerns is big box stores and neon lights and street lights everywhere and losing trees. Losing our quaint environment that we have.
Very good points.
Bastrop has what they call uniquely Bastrop.
Yeah, we drove through that.
And
Especially downtown Bastrop is really cool.
so that's part of it, but their development code was developed around the concept as they grow. And their development code has both pros and cons with it, but they have embraced how do we maintain the character as we grow, because we're next to Austin and all the stuff that's happening there, so to that point.
So living in Fulshire, I lived in West Lanesford for 25 years. Living in Fulshire, the one thing that I think they didn't do quick enough was a good plan, because things were coming in on, Fulshire grew like scary fast.
Still.
And it is. Things were coming in on top of them before they had what I would call a good strategic plan or a good economic development plan. A lot of it wasn't, it was a lot of growing pains, and a lot of issues with the city actually physically being too small to handle the growth as it was coming in. They were trying to hire people left and right just to keep up with permitting and planning and zoning. And so I think a lot of things in Fulshire happened, whether they were the nicest things to happen or not at the time. Now, they've seemed to, I've been here forever, they've seemed to have, gotten most of that under control. And I think a lot of it helped when a lot of property was actually donated to the city and a lot of property in the area and where they are now. But like I said, not having a good plan as the growth was coming on top of Fulshire, I think had they done this early, that they would have had a lot more control over how it came in on top of them. So I think it's very, very important. Fortunately, there's not a ton of land here that is open, that's in the floodplain. But what is open, I think, needs to have a very, specific plan. And I agree, big box stores, the town is tiny. I think personally, what I think is cool is how Wallace is reviving itself. And the little shops and stuff that are opening down there. The quaintness of that is really cool. And they don't have the buildings here. But between here and Fulshire, there weren't buildings here. Fulshire, they all burnt down back in the 50s or something like that. So I think, to me, keeping Simonton quaint, I think is super important.
What does that mean to you? Like, what does keeping it quaint? Can you be more descriptive about it?
Boutique shops, independent-owned restaurants, no chains.
See, now you're gonna have a hard time with that.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
reality of it is that this is a copyright state,
Yeah.
and so there are limits to
We
it.
can drink.
I mean, you just won't put your dream or your vision down.
Yeah.
Like, it's easy for, I think one of the hangups has been people sit in this and they say, oh, this comprehensive plan is really expensive, this town is small, this isn't happening. If that's what you think, then you're wrong, because I can tell you probably 3 or 4 big box cities that knock on our door every single day. If y'all want a Dollar General,
Yes,
I can
I do.
No,
That's on my list. I don't have to drive anywhere else. Put Dollar General on the list. Wallace has one.
We could go right down there then.
And let me just
That's what we do
explain,
at
like,
Martin.
if you want a Dollar General, that's fine, but if you do your history with economic development, and Joe can attest this, Dollar General comes with a long-term stigma that they only settle in low-income, poverty-ridden rural communities.
They don't generate the income.
So they're in Fulshire, they're in Sugar Land, they're in Rosenberg,
they're
they're
in
Wallace,
Fulshire.
they're.
And when they came into
They're in
Fulshire, they built.
And when they came into
I own
Fulshire-
right next to Dollar General.
Right, yeah.
And they came in as Fulshire was under a mass development.
They were in Wallace, they're in
2006
Patterson,
is
right.
when they came into Fulshire, before all of.
And you talk to a lot of
before Cross
cities,
Creek,
and they
before-
are a
before
long-term
there was a lot of
nightmare.
money coming into Fulshire and
For what
nobody liked
reason?
the Dollar General there.
They generate an incredible amount of litter. The company itself does not respect landscape ordinances that cities put in. They have high turnover rate of employees. It doesn't attract the clientele or really like the retention of employees that cities really want. I mean, I'm not saying that they're terrible, I'm just saying that if somebody sits in this room and says, we're a small town, this isn't happening, you're wrong.
So I
We get
think-
approached quite frequently about 24-hour poker houses, Dollar General, Dollar Tree, I mean, there's a whole list,
So I can
so.
tell you that Dollar General, because we had police, I own the bar right there. We had police literally sitting in front of Dollar General all night long, every night, because there was like a chain of hits on Dollar Generals. So it brings in a lot of,
Correct.
We're talking about
Maybe
tax
down-
revenue though,
but
right?
maybe
For the
down the
city.
it's not
road.
that great.
This would identify the area that a business like that might be a great idea for Simonton. We don't know what that would be today. We certainly wouldn't want it to be next to City Hall or next to Anthony's, let's say, but the planning process is supposed to help you identify what goes where type of thing.
And you know, I mean, Dollar General by itself is not a bad thing. I do go there for a lot of time. However, I will tell you that even all these cities that have economic growth do have Dollar Generals, but if you look at how they're built, that is the key, right? So maintenance is a big deal, and just by themselves, they don't bring in that quality, but if they go into an existing center that has all your other stores, there's good management, you know, there's more amenities, then yes. So I think what we are looking at is not just the use, right? It's the type of use and what kind of environment it is built in. And what we always talk about in land uses, which is really important now, is the return on investment, right? Somebody is making an investment to put water, sewer, flood control, you know, things like that, and you have this piece of property. You talked about taxes, a very good point. If you look at, that's where it's really important to see what type of use will generate the most tax for the investment you have put in. Common sense, right? We all do that, right? And that's where I think stores like Dollar General won't do well by themselves. You have to have some high quality stores around them for them to thrive. So that's why I want to make sure it's not against a particular use. It's traditionally what they have meant. And sustainability in the wrong run.
And actually to add to what you're saying, small shops aren't going to provide that tax revenue. You are going to have something a little larger, because small, like if we try to create it, and I would love to see that, like everybody here, I'd love to see it remain small and have small tax shops all along here, and it remains small, but we need something a little bit larger here to generate tax revenue for this, to alleviate some of the taxes that the citizens are paying.
And that's, I think, what Joseph mentioned. So it has to be a mix, and that's what we can do as we go along to see, you know, what we do is we do fiscal analysis, right? It's not just a touchy-feely thing. What would it mean? So for example, I'll give you an example. Pasadena, right, has the most revenue. A city manager in Pasadena has it so easy. But look at the quality of life.
Because the refinery,
Right? Exactly, that's what I'm saying. Well, we were part of the Baytown Comprehensive Plan, and there was the struggle, right? You had all these refineries that brought these high dollar to the city, but then you had neighborhoods that had really deteriorated because of that.
Well, we just dealt with that because
I saw
with
that.
the concrete plant, what people don't realize is that people were really quite ugly to the city, saying that we weren't fighting it and whatever, which was not true. The concrete plant would have generated hundreds of thousands of dollars of sales tax revenue for the city. And we had to make the decision to stop the concrete plant and being able to acquire the hundreds of thousands of dollars. And when I say hundreds of thousands, I mean almost millions of sales tax money for the city on an annual basis, because it was a quality of life issue for our community. And without zoning, we would be setting a standard for what we welcomed into our community as a standard of business.
So the other thing is that sound business premise is one thing, is that some of the things that you may want as we start to get into the weeds of what you want specifically, retail follows rooftops, they follow the people, access to folks. And so some things are going to happen at different times, some things may not happen, because think about it, retail's also changing. And things are happening where consumables are being more, the things that you can buy online, you're seeing ever since the last 15, 20 years, things are really changing in retail. That's changed. When I was a kid, you went downtown, and then the malls started happening in the suburbs, and then so it continues to ebb and flow over time.
I think I support Jeff Bezos by myself, just saying.
Point being is that we can have specific things, like in Needle they want a Whataburger. Well, Whataburger, or in Rosenberg they want an H-E-B at this location. Those businesses all make their determination based off of the marketplace.
And we did it 15 years, 20 years ago.
And then you also have some things that can go on. Twinwood's a great development. It's going to have a lot of different things going on, and they have their landowners, so they have a vision that's going to need to be. We're not going to be able to tell them exactly either. So it's going to be working with people, but they have an investment they're going to maintain. So there's a lot of factors, a lot of variables that are going to come. And it's not going to be, well, I just want this or I want that. There's going to be things that happen over time. But you start to put things in place. Hopefully you create the environment, you create the infrastructure to help move this forward.
Well, see, that's why I'm kind of excited to be on part of this, because where retail could actually happen here isn't where the concrete plant is going to go, because it's in the floodplain. So any retail within a flat land, they can't build up high enough to meet the requirements for FEMA with the...
They don't have to. Commercial, according to FEMA, commercial does not have to elevate. That is the caveat with.
Yeah, but do you really want to build a Dollar General where it's going to flood?
Well, you'd be surprised. We've been approached by two different private equity investment companies wanting to build a gas station there. So, I know. I don't know what the draw is, but I'm just saying, there are people out there that clearly doesn't matter to.
I had the brainchild of the brainchild idea for that property, if anybody would like to. Build a boardwalk.
Yeah. My concern would be that the development would come before the infrastructure was ready for it. Because like right now at 1093 and 1463, that development came way too fast and the roads weren't able to accommodate everything, and now it's just absolutely awful. So I think that if we all agree as a city, as a community, to allow whatever is to come, we need to be able to safely accommodate the traffic for that. And I get it, it's already a pain with the extra stoplights and stuff, but I'm not necessarily referring to just that, but we have shops and restaurants and things, and we have a 2-lane road. And I know TechStop is doing what they're doing at the roundabout, and that's fine, but I just mean, overall, you have the bridge going into Wallace, you've got 2-lane roads, you've got trucks. I just think that needs to be something
I think the biggest customer base is the tickets that Fulcher writes. Because they've always got a few customers if you ever see them driving.
They don't have much else to do, they just like to hang out.
You know, a couple of things, our strength is, we are a little further ahead than most cities, I think, even though I know we are behind, I get it. But we do have land, but I think our biggest strength is hopefully a great partnership with Twinwood, because they're going to be the biggest driver of this area for the most part. And I think, you know, one of my vision is, if you've ever been to, and it doesn't have to look like that, but if you've ever been to Georgetown on a weekend, it's awesome. They got pizza shops, soda shops, ice cream shops, wineries, you know, little barbecue bars, different things for everybody. And there was kids and people and adults out for the weekend, and Salado has their unique deal with their issue too. But I hope to see this stay as a high-end area where I can't stand that Fulcher signed that agreement with Johnson Development, and now how many apartments do we have in Fulcher that's overwhelmed the schools, that's overwhelmed the roads? So the density, we want to make sure, I hope we don't have that kind of density, Glenn. But, you know, it's going to grow, the houses are going to come, but I hope it's a little more spread out. Like, I lived in West Lakes for 10 years. I don't know if we'll be West Lakes, but I hope it is a little more spread out. We have something in this downtown area. We keep the retail, we'll have the retail, but in the bigger box stuff just a little closer to where the new roads will be. The roads don't, TechStop don't keep up. They're reactionary. It's just not going to happen. No. And we do have some weaknesses because we are small. They're going to try to push us over. So we're going to have to jump on saying no or setting those parameters in place for what we want to see. This thing couldn't have come any quicker to me as far as I'm concerned. I did this my whole life. So those are probably the things that I hope to come out of this. There's plenty more, but we'll talk about for sure in here. But just kind of like, I hope this Anthony's from here kind of spreads out. And if you haven't, go to Georgetown, go to Salado. That's where we kind of go on the weekends every now and then. And it's really neat to do that.
A family community environment.
You know, it's not a strip mall bars. It's things for all, from all ages. And they're in the square, and they're Salado, they're walking up and down. There's boutiques, but there's eateries, nice ones, and just cheeseburger places, but nice. We got a nice restaurant, but we can have more. And that would bring in the sales revenue. It's not going to bring in the concrete plant, but I don't want to look at the concrete plant. Let's put that somewhere else, because we're going to need it. But we do have a pretty big partner here. I think that's a strength of ours too. with the twin wood. But time will tell with what those guys do, because it is Texas, you can kind of do with what you want.
As far as quality of life attributes, I hear a lot, and you might have captured it earlier, about dark skies and the ability to implement whatever that is going to look like before the growth and the building starts, so there's not as much retrofitting.
So the problem with dark skies is, so a friend that I worked with for 30 years he was the fourth founder of the Dark Skies for Fort Bend County. 5 years ago, that was taken away.
I'm not saying I have the answers, I'm just saying
No, I
I
know,
hear from
but-
the public a lot.
so-
What I would like
but-
to know would be,
The dark sky ordinance.
Oh, was it taken?
It was taken away.
Okay,
It's
it's
gone.
taken away.
From Fort Bend County. Because the observatory at Brazos Bend State Park was actually the ones who initialized the dark
Right.
sky ordinance due to the fact of the observatory. It's gone.
But there's still communities also, like Rosenberg has one that,
Yeah.
for light spillage, you have to have your
I thought we
photometric
had a light
studies
one.
part
We
of
can't
it.
have lights that are so bright and we do have
It's a
something in play.
formula.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and-
we do
but
have
then-
some.
And that was my deal too, is like, because the county had it.
Right.
So rural areas in the county were having to do all the downlights and all this stuff, and had to be like X, Y,
Yeah, it's
or
really
below.
confusing. I mean, you're right, it's very confusing. It's a very complex formula, and it's very hard
Right.
to come in after the fact and retrofit,
Exactly.
especially like in our instance, and Lori knows because we've talked about this at length, like if you're going to Anthony's and you're like, okay, we're passing a dark skies ordinance, like it's a very complicated formula to retrofit, like all the lighting.
So, but in Anthony's isn't that bright, but so the thing is, like, I guess my question for you guys, and you would know this, can the city actually adopt a dark light or a dark sky ordinance?
So Rosenberg has some lighting ordinances where when you submit your plan into photometric, and so communities do deal with lighting, and they deal with a number of things.
Okay, because I know that in the past, I would assume that, because I know Fulshire depended on the dark sky from Fort Bend as they were going, but like I said, that's been eradicated.
Because it was so complicated. That's one of the reasons.
So, and that's the other thing, that you don't want to have an ordinance that's so complicated that people don't understand. So when it comes to dark skies, cities have adopted other measures. Some things that the city can do is regulate the height of lighting, make sure that it's shielded. They can ask for a photometric, which is not a big deal, like not a very complicated one, but all it says is at the property line you should have zero spill off, right? So, and then and the intensity of light is another thing that they can do. All these flashing signs, electronic signs, they can regulate the light intensity, they can regulate how fast the sign moves. So there are a lot of things that can be done that kind of leads towards the goal. Doesn't have to be a dark sky ordinance. Because dark sky ordinance also is, yeah, because dark sky ordinance is extreme, because the city that we are working on, Fair Oaks Ranch, it's next to a military base. It is pitch dark at night, and you have deer and hill country. So, I mean, there are ways you can balance both, yeah.
Quick question, I don't mean to go down a rabbit hole, it's a change of subject. I'm wondering how many square miles we're actually talking about.
Yeah.
For the city,
For the comprehensive plan.
Yeah, is it just that light
our city limits
tan
is 2
area in there?
So,
square miles.
actually, the comprehensive plan will incorporate the city limits as well as the ETJ, yeah.
Oh, as
So,
well as the
except like I said, it's all a guide, like it's, you know, things have to happen. What it will help is if a developer does come and develop in the ETJ, and if they're looking for incentives from the city, that's where this document is going to be really valuable.
But for right now, it's 2 square miles.
is the city
No.
limits.
No, it's a city
Plus
limits.
and-
Right, I was like, for the city limits is only 2
Oh,
square miles.
okay, city limits is 2 square miles.
When we have the break, I'll get the map, there's a map, Sarah, that, I'll get it and just set it out when we have our break here in a minute.
We will only benefit from tax on the 2 square miles, but the ETJ is gonna help us know what's coming in the future as far with development and everything as a whole, but right, we won't benefit from that. We'll only benefit from what the
That's
city.
actually not
Right?
true, because
Well, the
Anthony's
sales
is in the
tax.
ETJ. and
Say it again?
Dewberry Farm. Anthony's is in the ETJ.
It's in the city limits.
In the city limits.
City limits.
Yeah.
So it's like Dewberry Farms, that's in the ETJ.
Dewberry Farms
Dewberry
is
Farms.
not.
I'm not Dewberry, sorry, Blessington.
I knew what you
Reading the
meant.
little cow thing
Right, they are
today.
not in the city limits today.
They're not.
But they're in the ETJ,
But
and
we
they
don't.
still pay sales tax.
They,
on
but
the
we
sales.
don't,
No, we
the
don't.
city doesn't get any.
Yeah, but we don't get it.
Right, yeah, we don't get any.
It goes to the county.
County gets it. They have
Just
the
like
county
we
assistance
do.
district.
Yes, we have a CAD.
Well, the state gets
So,
most of it
some
anyway.
places,
Oh,
the
yeah.
county
Oh, absolutely.
county
we don't get
assistance
any.
district, and they collect it if the city's not collecting it. In Neville, they have that, in ETJ, the county shares 1 cent of that back, so it depends on where they've adopted some of that.
Do we have a share?
I
We
don't
have a
know.
CAD, yes.
The county.
Well, we split it with the county.
I'm sorry, I thought you were still talking about.
No, the CAD, yes. So Blessington is in the CAD, but the amount that we capture from that is very, very minimal. It's like $30,000 a year for that. And the county gets the other half. But the county's collection from that CAD, they don't have to use it in Simonton. In fact, they don't use it in Simonton. They can use it anywhere in the precinct, anywhere in precinct 1.
Is there an approximate acreage that's not,
In the ETJ.
yeah, not in the,
That's not in the what?
well, that's not, cannot
Oh,
be
yeah, we can pull
developed?
it up. Craig can pull it up. I mean, I don't have that number off the top of my head, but Craig can pull the ETJ acreage.
In the city or in the ETJ?
Well, both,
The ETJ,
yeah,
the city is 2 square miles.
okay.
So, do you know off your top of your head?
I can pull it.
But how many acres is there that
believe it's like
are
198,
available
right?
for development?
Well, I know along 1093, there's close to 300 acres along 1093 that is property that's available for purchase that can be developed that is not owned by Twinwood.
And that's the ETJ though, that's
No,
not.
that's the city
That's just the
limits.
city?
That's the city limits. I know Erica pulled that number a couple of weeks ago, and it was like, Lori, do you remember, it was like 209 something around there.
Where did that come from?
I want.
So what control do you have over that?
Yeah, 1093 and
Yeah.
14.
So just to clarify, Lorraine, that's 1093 and 14.
I thought it
I
was
think
where
you said
the, where they put
1093.
the chemical plant.
It's 1093, that's available property with road frontage that somebody can purchase and potentially
And then
develop.
there's some, maybe beyond.
And some of those tracts are significantly large tracts that can be. It's not like 1 or 2 acres here. It's like
But that'd be the
100.
biggest, that'd be the
If
largest
it
tract.
extends.
I want you to stop it.
It's not one individual tract, that's a cumulative number
Oh, I
of
got you.
available acres.
Okay.
Yeah, so
It's somewhere between 250 and 300, I can't remember. Erica has that number.
So one thing we will do as part of this exercise is we will map, typically we map all the vacant land, but also map land that has potential for development. Like if you have 20 acres with a small ranch today, but it's on the path of development, you know that's going to develop in 5-10 years. And so you will all sit at a table and then decide, once you see the vacant land, what would you like to see that happen? So I think it helps to see it on the map. We'll have the acreages so that what is in the city, what is in the county. Why it's important to talk about land in the county is if you have an interlocal agreement, the city can regulate subdivision ordinances. They can impose their subdivision ordinance in the county and also regulate signage. 2 big things that still cities have the ability to do. So that's why it's going to be important to look at this land and come up with some regulations for the things that you can do in the ETJ. So with that, I'm going to actually, before we move on to our next section, I know we're running a little late, but I'll give you like a 5-minute break just to walk around, please grab some food. Our city has provided all this nice goodies here, and then we'll reconvene in about 5 minutes where we do a quick city tour. That will give you an opportunity to actually pinpoint areas to us as we drive along the streets sitting here. Thank you. So we are going to use that map as Diana is going to guide you through the city tour. So just
You should tell
pretend you're
that
on
story
the
about
bus
the small,
and
the small houses that want to
get
come in and
started.
shit in. You said no.
Also,
Yeah, I've
it's
got one.
on the
Thank you.
screen above, if you can see it. I don't know how, if you can really get a good view on it. So what we did was, we kind of came up with a kind of a proposed like route through the city, but you guys know the city much better than we do, and so, feel free to direct us in a different place or highlight things that we probably don't even know about that we should know about. I'll go ahead and just get started here at City Hall. The printed map kind of shows the route. The stars have numbers. And those are just some places that we identified. It's not everything that's significant in the city, it's just some that we knew of. And we were just gonna kind of follow the Google down the roads. I don't know if you guys use this very much, but I can waste like so much time in here. Oh, it's so amazing.
Okay, so we're leaving the driveway.
So amazing. Here we go. So we're going to City Hall,
Diana
right?
is going to be our driver, yeah.
But we're City Hall, not close, let's see, I need to zoom in a little. Here we go.
I think you need to go.
Yeah.
There you go.
There we are, okay. So we'll start here at City Hall, and then I was thinking we would go east and then kind of turn back into some of the narrow rural roads and then kind of swing back around, and then we'll just go everywhere that you guys think we need to. It's not like we need to show you the town, you know it, right? So
So the purpose is for you to just shout out what you think, good, bad, ugly, whatever, so that we get some.
yes, so as we're going through this, and if you have thoughts about anything that you see, it might be something that you really love about the town, something that you're afraid is going to go away when all the growth happens, something you want to protect, something you want to get rid of, anything, we just want to hear your thoughts about it. So please just feel free to just chime in and tell us what you're thinking about it. And we'll raise things if we see things as we go through as well. Now, so this, Google, in some cases, it's relatively up to date. The most recent pictures, some of them date to 2023. Google drives around and they update their images every so often. I found when I practiced this earlier that a lot of it is out of date. So, you will see a scene that doesn't show anything that I know there's something there now. So you'll notice that. So there's instances where you'll just have to fill us in on what's really there if it doesn't look accurate anymore. So here we go, going down east. I'd like to talk about this if there's anything that anyone has to say. Yeah, we're right next door.
Okay, so the school is privately owned and it's a photo studio and home now. They've done a great job of keeping the building interesting, but upgrading, new windows, but they didn't change the look. I think I can get some feedback from folks that they like that and wish that, although we don't have many buildings that have this look more historic, people really, really like that.
If you've never been inside, go, because
Used to be a restaurant in a,
Ken's,
Nice.
there was a restaurant in a place you could stay.
Oh, wow.
where was the school?
Some people bought that and turned it into one of the best restaurants I've ever eaten in. And they also had, it was like a bed and breakfast, so you could stay there. And it was the finest looking thing inside, one of the most beautiful places I've ever seen.
Yeah.
They shut it down. It was an interesting story. They were doing fine. The guy wanted to go back to school, so he sold it to the people that own it now. And that guy's a photographer, and they live there. I don't have a problem with that. That's what do you call it? And
Historic.
yeah.
Yeah, they did a beautiful restoration job.
He's kept the historic parts inside as well.
Yeah.
Actually, my son did a senior picture.
Nice
there.
deal.
I saw some of the interior pictures on their website for the studio.
He's
They had some inside.
phenomenal.
It's like, wow, it looks great. So that's what an asset. So, excuse me.
I think I hear a lot of feedback that if we could replicate that, that's the kind of feel and look that people say they would like. We get lots of positive feedback about the white fences. You might notice that, especially on lots of properties that belong to Quinwood.
So did they buy the?
It's a
Did they buy
beautiful
this?
look.
Okay.
Sorry.
They bought the old Jeremy Farm.
Yeah, Twinwood owns it.
Okay.
Yeah, they're big on the nice fencing, for sure.
Those are things that we would like to hear, because the recommendations in the housing and neighborhoods part would be something like, this is something the city cherishes, and white picket fences gives character to the city, something that, needs to be, encouraged. So when you have developers, you have something to put at the table, right? So, yeah, one thing that is your aspiration.
Okay, this is going a little bit slow.
Okay, so this next business that you're coming up on the right, it's the same side of the road as the photo studio.
Did I pass it already?
No, right there.
There it is, right there.
It's in a home that's been repurposed into a business. He does a great job of keeping it up, looking pretty from the front. I'll be curious to hear what folks think about that sort of business in a former home.
I don't think it's the best look for Simonton, with the comments everybody's been making about how they want it to look. I mean, I don't think that's
So
the
you don't like
nicest place I've seen.
that from
Well,
the front?
it's a business.
Or is it
But I
that
don't think
equipment
it's
is government?
attractive, that's what you're asking.
An interesting
With
thing
a
about
lot of
this-
the house itself.
So,
The house itself or the
no, just,
the equipment around it?
in the
the
front
Yes.
or?
and it's more and more equipment, and they're taking less and less good care of it. I don't know
In the
if
back?
that matters or not. I mean,
An interesting.
well, just
thing-
look
Well,
at
I'm saying,
it.
like, for example, I'm sorry for interrupting, but like the new vet has moved into the house that used to be Bobby Hunt's house that's next to Anthony's. That's not this business, but, so that's another case of where, and we have several of them around, that businesses have moved in to what was residential before,
Yeah,
and most of them keep them look really
Yeah,
nice.
absolutely.
But how you differentiate, this is good, this is not as much, maybe because of all the equipment, so I was trying to ask you more
Probably.
questions, just what.
Not necessarily the house.
Yeah, that'd be
The
what I'd
house is
say.
great, but then the
Yes.
rest of it around it.
I think I'd rather see grass than just a huge
Well, I will
pavement
say,
parking lot.
one of the
Yeah.
things I want to comment on this is MSC Earthworks, for several years in a row, this was our largest tax generator in the entire city of Simonton by millions.
Well, it's looking better.
Wow.
He also won the flooded 2 years in a, 3 years in a row. He was very beneficial. in
Always
helping us
provided
out.
us equipment.
And he helped Weston Lakes out.
Yeah, he is extreme, I mean, not that it changes the facade, but I
Right.
will say, as a
Community.
business owner, he is incredibly city friendly, and he has literally met me at 2 o'clock in the morning with a light tower when we were flooding. So we do have a great relationship with him.
Good.
I will say, you might notice he is less and less equipment is being stored there because some of his equipment is leased, and so he has to pay Fort Bend County taxes on that leased equipment, and because that Fort Bend County rate has gotten so high, he has moved some of that equipment outside of the county to a lower lease tax area. So this year, he was not our highest producing tax revenue for that purpose, but he had kind of given us a heads up that.
Tell them we just want the white picket fence.
Right? Yeah, so the white picket fence.
Actually, that's a very good point, that those are the solutions that you can look for, right? It's okay for them to be there as long as it's not visible from the road. So how do you screen it? Maybe just a row of shrubs or a picket fence or something. So there are, which could be very cheap, not very expensive alternatives. But if they just put a row of shrubs, then it's no big deal. Nobody sees it. You keep your tax revenue, let them flourish in the city. So those things are important to come to a middle ground somewhere. So
Yeah, Lori, I think the house looks better. Of course, the vehicle's in front, but it's on 1093. 1093 has become more and more industrial commercialized. But if we had some kind of facade for the equipment, that's the only thing that kind of bothers me is you see all that in the back. Hate that he had to move it if we was making all that tax revenue.
But I think too, part of the deal is at this point, because there is no zoning at all in the city, there's nothing unfortunately, the people who have bought old businesses or houses and turned them into businesses have done an extensive amount of work, as far as I can tell, to maintain the integrity of the structure and make it look nice and all that stuff. So, I mean, those are the quaint little things that you want. And to me, because the majority of downtown Simonton is already businesses or old homes that have turned into businesses, it's going to be virtually impossible to turn them back into residential.
Yeah.
Oh, I agree. I agree with that. Just
As far as that
Just
house
give me your input
goes,
as we go.
those guys did extensive remodeling on it when they bought it.
It was
I mean, that's an old Mr. Barnes house, and they gutted it, and fixed it up.
This house?
Yeah, it's
Did a
very
good
nice
job.
on the inside. It's very modern,
Yeah.
kind of industrial.
Better than tearing it down,
What
put
kind
a
of
metal
business
Oh,
building.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
There's
absolutely.
a earthworks mover.
Oh, okay.
They do, like they'll go into different construction sites. They do kind of like a large plethora.
Okay, those beautiful trees too.
They do have beautiful trees.
So that's one thing, I keep going. So, one thing with cities that don't have zoning, the misconception is it's hard to control development. And the only thing really, when you look at the entire set of development codes, the only thing that you really can control is land use, right? The zoning part where it says this land is zoned for residential, you can't do anything else. But typically, if you look at the zoning ordinance of the cities, there's only one chapter devoted to that, where it says, this is a land use table, R1, R2, R3, this is what you can have. But there are 4 or 5 other chapters that talk about development standards, tree ordinances, fencing, landscaping, facade requirements, subdivision ordinance is a big tool that you can still have. So it's important to understand that there are ways to, control growth or, guide it in the way that you want to. It's really just land use. So, for example, residences turning into a commercial, what is the real issue? First of all, is that an issue? But if that helps to maintain the house, to preserve the house, or the building, is it really an issue that it's not a residential anymore, but it's an office? So we have to think through these. Maybe the location might be a bad location, but if it helps to preserve a historic building, then what is a priority?
great.
Yeah, so even without zoning, cities can generally adopt development standards, like, screening requirements or landscaping requirements or setback requirements. There are pros and cons to those things, but that's another tool that is there, even without zoning.
Can I point one thing out? And Mayor, am I wrong? We do have a development ordinance,
We do.
and it does regulate setbacks and that type of thing.
It would be, I'm sure, updated as we progress through this project too.
Right, but it's not like we're just without protection.
Right. And so one of the things that we would do is once we get your feedback as to what your aspirations are, we will look back into the development ordinance, and we call it a diagnostic, a very fancy word, but really to see if that ordinance really addresses all the issues and is there any scope to make, to redo it or to tweak it. There may or may not, depending on what the state comes down with, but at least see if there are any gaps that can be filled.
So, we are kind of low on time.
Yes.
So, just, I can keep going, or you guys can just say
So
that.
Ash Road, is that part of the city too?
Yes, yeah.
I think the map
There's like
just
this
is a little
tail.
bit cut off there.
It's all very, it seems like it's all very rural back there, so, I can, bypass going down there. There was a cell tower.
But
I
there's
saw
an
on-
important thing to,
There is.
for everybody to just keep in mind. Because our population is so heavily in Valley Lodge, it can be easy to forget that we have all this other area that's important to represent those folks and have a plan for it as well. So there's not a ton of houses or things to see on Ash, but just pointing out that it's important to remember that Ash and Annals loop over to Saunders, all.
Well, because there's so much property, if a developer comes in, they offer some of these people.
And they
large-
have. That's where I was getting, is
And
Ash
eventually they'll
Road
sell.
has had several tracts of land for sale. And There have been several offers, some of them have fallen through because they, just various different reasons, but we have seen a warehouse. There's been a warehouse that has looked at some property for sale there. There was a baseball facility. They were also going to build a warehouse for baseball training. So there is a lot of potential that people forget about on Mills Road because there are 5+ track acres of land that people are putting up for sale, and they are attracting those
Non-revenue generating businesses.
correct. Well, and they're attracted, I mean, for a reason, you know.
Because there's space, yeah.
Well, and relative, it's a low tax rate.
Yeah, I know rules.
So I noticed a couple of these, yes, as I was going on my virtual tour the other day. And again, that's another thing that, you know, the screening requirements, there's different ways to, you know, maybe you probably know more about this. I don't know how much the state like restricts what you can do for those that, yeah. I think the Wi-Fi might be a little slow here. Okay.
Yeah, one of the priorities is high-speed internet.
High-speed internet, yes.
So I have another question, I'm just gonna be a pain in the neck. Because I'm assuming that all this stuff that's in kind of like the white here is the city limits.
Yes.
Okay, but Anthony's is outside of the city limits. And
Sorry.
This is just not, this map doesn't.
I think it's not.
Anthony's is.
Yeah, it's not.
Yeah, this hadn't been updated.
So, yeah, this is
Apparently.
That map over there is
Yeah.
much more.
right. This is a Google map. We will make another
This is
map for your next session. Yeah, yeah, it's really important.
A lot of these need to cross.
Does it go on this side of the road though? No, so it's all north of Timothy.
Yeah, this ain't all.
Sorry. You can go on our website and the GIS that we put on there. You can click on city limits on the GIS and it will give you the actual live, precise city limits. And Anthony's is and on the GIS, it's great because you can signify city limits, you can do ETJ, you can do the
County Assessment District.
management district, the CAD district, you can do all of that on the GIS and it will give you the precise up-to-date lines on that.
Okay.
And if you need it printed out, just swing by.
They said it's outdated, but they will give us.
So maybe since we are kind of running out of time, I was gonna ask you, since we started 10 minutes late, is it okay to stop at 8:15 or do you just wanna stop at 8 o'clock?
I don't care.
Okay, because we are okay, so
Can we, is there any, I know it's not designed, but the circle that's coming, is there any way to have a graphic so we can see it for vision later? Next meeting or third meeting, whatever?
Has it been finalized yet?
It hasn't been finalized.
But is there any just
Hopefully.
I'm
general?
sure, yeah, I can get that from the, I mean, we have a copy, but, even from the copy that Lori and I have gotten, there's
It's gonna
some changes. Yeah, we should
I
have to
think
do that.
What circle?
when we talk
Like
about
roundabout, it'll be at most also.
Didn't they name that
Semi-four-way top.
Oh,
So, sir, ma'am,
I mean, 18.
They're gonna put a roundabout
thing?
so, hey Burns, if you don't mind, could we,
Oh,
I didn't mean
sorry.
to, but since we're gonna stay an extra
Sorry, let's go.
15.
Sorry.
Sorry.
I'm trying to fly through your city in 10 minutes.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to get your 10 back, and then we'll talk about the intersections.
Yeah.
I noticed what looked like a lot of orchards or former orchards or tree farms.
That's 20.
Are those still active? Oh, okay. That's part of Twinwood, okay. Okay, so I'm gonna just jump down to the park,
Yeah.
which is not showing here. I believe that there's some of it developed, if it's not all
Correct.
so far, okay.
Yeah, Google just hasn't caught up with that.
It's, right, exactly. But reading about that, that seems like a real amenity. But outside of the city. Right. Do people use it a lot? Is it open? And
It's open, I think it's building some use.
Seems like it gets the baseball teams
Baseball.
practicing, or maybe soccer teams too, but it's not a huge, just
Is
yet.
there any possibility to have better connectivity to the park from the city, any kind of
As far as mobility, you
trails?
mean?
Yeah, There's trails, hike and bike, things like
So the
that.
county maintains it, and
Okay.
we have a really great relationship with the county, so I think, in this process,
Mhm.
that is definitely, that's a relationship we want to highlight, and that definitely we could put into plan some
Mhm.
connectivity issues. And we've had several community events out there. And for those that, Stacy, you come, some of that have come for the community events out there, surprisingly, there are a lot of families that live back there with kids that, and like young teens that frequent the park a lot, and they actually use kind of that Nell Saunders Ash route back there. They ride bikes and stuff like
So
that.
there is something there already.
Yes.
Well, they just ride on the roads, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's just
Yeah,
through roads.
yeah.
Okay, is there anything
I
else?
was
we
gonna
look
say,
at?
when you go on Saunders, you'll get to 1489, and you might wanna come up from the south on 1489,
Yes.
since there's lots of new.
Am I in the right place? So I think this, the photos are not up to date, so you'll have to fill us in on what's not showing.
You can see just miles of the beautiful white picket,
Fence,
white
yeah.
fence and the beautiful trees.
Yes.
But the white fence is now replaced.
Yes, it's now,
Are we there yet?
yes.
On this photo?
Oh, yeah.
Well, not all of it.
No, not all of that, but right there it is. Yeah.
It's going through for
Or where they have the new.
So you'll have to just have a look at it.
Yes.
They replaced that with a more permanent that is by the state.
So one of the things that can be done through subdivision ordinances, if you look at your parkland dedication, you can say, that can make sure that whatever development happens, they dedicate open space. And you can say all that open space needs to be along the street, so that at least when you're driving, there will be houses, but they will be behind. And the picket fence and some of the open space and trees can be maintained. That's one tool that you do have. So those are things that we will, discuss as we go through our other sections.
Nice looking church.
It is.
Is that a historic building?
I don't know if it's been designated, but it is.
But it is old. Okay, yeah, it's very.
So it's the church and they have a private.
That's also the only school we have in our city.
I remember you saying that, right?
The 20s,
About the 20s?
the original church, which is, that original building,
Is that it?
Yes.
half that size.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they've expanded on that over the years when they added.
They doubled the size of that chapel in the 80s.
Did y'all have a plan for that? Did y'all plan ahead for that, for the growth of the town? I'm just asking.
As in,
I mean, you have to do that when your town's growing.
Google caught it when it
Start
was
busting out.
the work was happening.
That's when it was under construction. That's when we remodeled it a few years ago.
Yeah, we're going.
Cemetery.
I was like, it's on the wrong way. You know about that.
Yeah,
it's a great cemetery layout.
yeah.
The cemetery?
There is a cemetery back there.
Where is it? Where is that?
It's on the church
Behind the
property,
church? Okay.
behind the church.
20 acres.
Okay.
The church is on 20 acres.
That little house has been there forever too.
Yeah, I can tell.
Twinwood owns that too.
Oh, really?
They do.
Yeah, 21.
Yeah.
There's a fence in
They
front of
lease-
it
I'm not
now.
sure about that one particularly.
I think Christy told me that they do.
Yes, the answer is yes.
Go back to the corner of,
Go ahead.
go to the corner of Blacksmith and 1489 and look what's there.
Blacksmith?
You want to see what Simonton doesn't need.
What does Simonton mean?
Does it?
Grocery store?
School that's at Blacksmith
Oh,
and
this is-
1489 where they're draining sewage into the yard.
Oh, where's that?
See,
What's the street?
there you go.
Has that been
See,
reported to the county?
I think it's been reported. They haven't done anything about it, right?
I've never heard that there was an issue,
Yeah.
so I'm asking you if
Oh my
you
gosh.
reported it.
Yes.
Me personally, no. I've been told that other people have. and then nothing's been done.
Well, the city
But
doesn't.
since we're looking at stuff like that,
Yeah.
Well, Burns also just told me the city doesn't, that's not the city.
I understand
Yeah,
that.
that's environmental. So I know that I've personally contacted environmental several times about
There
it.
you go, that's what I'm talking about.
I know that Erica has, I think CJ, you called it in.
No.
No, well, okay.
Blue did.
Blue called it in, yeah.
Okay, I made it down.
Well, what I'm saying is, we're talking about
That's what you get when
improving
the
the
county
city,
is in charge.
and we can't get any help from the authorities, is what I'm saying. You're not talking about that.
Well, and I think that's one of the big things too. If that's happening somewhere this close by, then, you know, with all the things that you talked about having a good plan, part of that is environmental health
Yeah.
and safety.
Absolutely.
And that actually violates all three, so.
That's my point.
Right.
Agencies.
Where is this at?
I don't know.
I'm saying it.
It's in another town, like code enforcement was a big deal, and they really talked a lot about that to see what we could do to make it better.
Blacksmith circles around.
That's a good way to do this.
I think we did this way, yeah.
Yeah, because it's a bigger spot.
Yeah.
So the roundabout's gonna be in here.
Yeah, it's gonna be a dog.
A dog
Behind David's shop.
Just trying to.
That's how it's proposed.
Y'all know
Okay.
that pond is wasn't tore down. Y'all don't know that, do you?
So what are some of the issues that you have with truck traffic?
Blacksmith, unfortunately.
I think truck traffic has increased with the I-10 construction and just the I-10 corridor in general. We're, basically Simonton is in the middle of two major operating concrete or
Sand plant.
material plants. So,
Sure, I'm looking.
so we do have a lot of truck
This Christian
traffic.
shop right there on the top, and then the little white house.
Again, they're just right by the mountain.
Oh, yeah. Right around there, yeah. Right on the-
Pop down onto the ground. That helps.
This, the reason I'm asking is, even TxDOT now, they're progressive in cities that will ask where they will have bike lanes incorporated into their right-of-way. And then cities can have, through the comprehensive plan, you can adopt cross-sections which show sidewalks, bike lanes, you know, and the actual streets, medians. And that is and TxDOT will respect some of that. I mean, it's a negotiation process, but for cities that have a thoroughfare plan, they can say, well, this is what we envision. It's a 4-lane road with a median, landscape median, and 6-foot sidewalks on both sides. We need to incorporate this within 170-foot right-of-way. TxDOT will work with the cities. But the key is to have a plan. To say, okay, this is not just, go with what TxDOT does. And so that's why I think it's important when you look at these streets, do you foresee that any of these streets, even though they have trucks, if it's possible to make them safer, would that be something desirable, that in key areas you do have pedestrian connectivity and these biking? Now, where that will happen, we'll have another workshop and have you just show us where it's important, maybe not everywhere in the city, but there might be areas that people can walk and bike to, so.
Can we have a no bicycle ordinance?
I want a no bicycle ordinance.
Yes, I'd love to have nothing on 1489 or 1093.
Andrew, I will tell you that the constable,
Like
so
that,
when
that
people
would-
do these bike rides, they have to file at the constable's office, and then they file with, TxDOT, and there's a couple other
Bike
agencies.
map,
that- They have actually, lately, the constable has not been approving a lot of the bike races going up and down 1489, just because we are sandwiched right in between two big materials plants and trucks, and the transportation issue with I-10 and people taking diversion, it's not safe. And we don't have a mobility plan that is safe to give these organizations that want to come here for the bike.
Personally, for me, watching Fulton grow the way it grew, and watching them build these roads, literally, and the white line is right against the edge, it's like there's
Well, I didn't mean to get down a rabbit hole.
Why would they not make it safe for people on bikes?
Right.
It's, a bike lane is
And
It
a lot
should
of
be
people
part of the
are-
road.
3 feet wide.
Like, it's really hard for us. I mean, Lori and I have been in several conversations with TxDOT about, you know, the growth pressures, what this is gonna look like with the dog bone. And Lana's exactly correct. It's hard for us to plead a case with TxDOT when we don't have a comprehensive plan with strategic studies to say, this is an issue because, and give them the information.
Right.
So this is one of those tools that can help us negotiate. Right now, we've got a seat at the table with TxDOT, but we're just there for listening and to add a couple of commentary notes. Like, we don't have that plan to say, we've done the study, we have the information, and this is what we need. And so hopefully this will help deliver that.
So one thing about having a thoroughfare plan is it will designate your streets, you know, classify them, and recommend a right-of-way width, right? So if it's going to look at how the area is going to grow all around you 20 years. And our firm is actually doing a thoroughfare plan for the entire region from Patterson all the way down. So what that will do is it will say, in 10 years, this is how the traffic is going to look like. You would need 6 lanes, okay? 3 lanes each way.
Oh,
So-
no, we like constant construction.
Right. But what you can dictate is, like I said, you can dictate how those can look like. If you want a median, if you want sidewalks. And what it will also do is when these vacant land develops, based on that, everybody who plants will have to dedicate that land along the right of way, right? So in the end, you're not going out there acquiring land, or TxDOT is not telling you that we can't build this because we don't have the land. So it's really important to have a thoroughfare plan as a tool to use for right of way dedication. But if you don't know what you need, you don't know what to ask.
We need turning lanes.
Yeah, turn lanes.
Actually, we put out I was able to get a traffic study, a traffic trailer, and I put it out by Anthony's, and it was right at Bessie's Creek, and did a traffic count, and it was alarming the amount of traffic. People say, oh, Simonton is so small, there are only X amount of people, why do you need this? The traffic studies tell you elsewise. Like, just because we're reporting a population of 800 does not mean that we're not a major thoroughfare between a lot of these booming cities, because the traffic trailer counts were extremely alarming. The amount of traffic aside from truck traffic, because that's counted differently, that would come through.
Well, if you're sitting outside Anthony's at night, the 18-wheelers rolling through there, it's crazy.
There's one.
Another thing that's happening
There's one right there.
on the traffic count side, another thing that's happening with the technology with these things is there's companies that track the cell phone data, and so that they'll do traffic count, and they can not only tell you how many vehicles are coming through, but where they come from, or where they and so you say, well, wait a second.
Big Brother is watching.
Well, but the companies that they know now, so that when you move, you may have moved from California, you're seeing that, and your prefix, your area code is from California, but now they'll figure out where that phone stays for more than a period of time. They'll call that home, then where it goes work and what routes it takes. So there's a number of things that you do, and you can also, a number of communities use it to track events. So if I put on an event someplace, I could tell who's coming, all these people, how successful it was. It is kind of scary, the amount of data that's out there, but that's another thing you can do to track who's coming through your community, what's the profile of it. And retail, like NewQuest, which is a huge $2 billion developer, they use that type of placer AI type of data to help figure out where they're going to put their next retail centers.
That's what I need, more AI.
Quick
Well,
question,
it's
is this
not-
where the city limits
that's it.
city limits are now, right by the creek? Is that right? Okay, I'll have to verify
So what are your thoughts on the creek and the river, like, what we were thinking, just looking at that, there might be some recreational
I thought you wanted to
opportunities.
end at 8:15.
Yeah.
I want to have a meeting about this.
We will have time to discuss this again, but it was just when we were driving by, we were like, wow, look at this, such a big asset, and so.
Y'all have alligators.
So the creek,
You forgot about
It's amazing if you could envision recreation on that creek. It's really pretty.
But most of it's on private property.
Is it?
The problem with the creek is it's private.
That's what they said.
Oh, yeah.
So I wouldn't include that at all.
One thing to note about Bessie's Creeks is privately owned.
We
Yeah,
did that.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, we'll look at it as part of the Parks plan.
You forgot our street.
Wish list.
So since we have like a minute left, so maybe what we can do is you have all the information, if, you can look at it and definitely share your other ideas based on what we discussed today. If you can think of something, this is just the beginning, so this was just to give you an idea of what the process looks like, and then send us your feedback. We'll talk to Jennifer and see how it comes back to us through the city or directly.
Just so
Either
y'all
way is
know,
fine.
we are creating a landing page on our webpage that will be specifically for the comprehensive plan. So, as Lana and Diana alluded to, along the way, we will have different, how to say it, like community input kind of surveys.
Yes.
And so those will be live, whether it's through a QR code, just a site or whatever, those will be on that comprehensive landing page on our homepage. And so we will update all of this information on there. It's in IT right now. They're building it to be able to make it go live, and we'll obviously notify all of y'all. But that will be the public drive will be to that page to take the surveys, to enter their information. We'll keep everything updated there. The different notices, and then the time schedule will be on that page as well.
What do you guys send out just for the CPAC committee? Will we have our own deal where it's?
I think so. Yeah. There will be specific things that just will be inclusive just to you all, right?
Yes,
On the committee. And then there will be other functions that are community driven.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so yes, we'll distinguish between those.
And I'd really like a copy of that map, either by email or on the website.
It is on the website.
It is?
So
Okay.
yes, it's on the website, and after this, we can show you how to access it on the website.
Will the PowerPoint be available?
That one.
Oh, that one.
And we'll put a link on this landing page to that map, so you can just click on that. So really what we are thinking is our next CPAC meeting is scheduled for August 7th. We'll probably have the same format. It's called the Findings and Visioning session, where by that time we would have done a lot of data collection, research, and we'll share your findings with you. We can go over that and then come up with our vision statement, guiding principles, things like that. And then and then go from there.
I want to be clear, will the PowerPoint be available soon on the city's website?
As soon as we have a landing page.
Yes.
So we have to wait months or weeks before that's available?
Daniel, we
No, we don't have to wait. It'll be available.
It'll be available soon?
We will make it available as soon as we get it.
Okay. And it's available today. Do you have it?
We can send it as soon as we can. As soon as.
I think you are aware that we are not taking months or weeks to post things, so as soon as it's available to us, if that's tonight or tomorrow or
Okay.
whatever day, we'll make sure that it's available.
Thank you, Mayor.
So that concludes the first CPAC. Again, it's really exciting to be with all of you. Mayor, do you have any closing comments?
Just thank you both. Thank you for the work you've done already in preparation of this, and thanks everybody for dedicating your time and being willing to give us your opinions, good, bad, and ugly, so we can make some great direction. Appreciate it.
So we won't meet until August? We don't meet over this.
That'll be the next formal meeting.
So they work, in between, they work. They're compiling the studies and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we'll be doing a lot.
We'll be doing some stakeholder meetings and stuff like that.
And we welcome your input at any time.
Like I said,